All right, now we've got Kirils Solovjovs with impact of the domain name drop catching on business security. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. So me and some of my colleagues were doing some research over the summer. Let me ask you a couple questions here. When was the last time that your non-IT friends, right? Some of you have some friends, and some of those friends may be non-IT friends. When has any of them typed something like an IP address lately? Well, never, right? Because the reality is that today, almost 100% of all non-malicious connections start with a DNS request. Even I have to think thoroughly to try to remember when did I actually use an IP address. I actually remember for this project I did use an IP address because I didn't want my connections to get logged into the DNS honeypot, but I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. So DNS is basically the blood of the internet, right? One of the protocols that is everywhere. And let's look at domain expirations. We see most domains aren't free. There are actually some free domains out there. .tk at least was free some time ago. Some ccTLDs offer some specific domains for free, a limited amount. But most domains are not free. So there are different reasons why a domain can expire. For example, negligence is one of those reasons. You just forgot to renew your domain. You get a grace period. You ignore it, you're on super cool vacation somewhere in the Caribbean, and you don't have access to email, right? That happens. And you just forgot to renew it. Or maybe you have set it to auto-renew. You've entered your credit card data, but credit card expired. It happens in a year or maybe 5 years. You can also decide to abandon a domain. For example, this is especially true for commercial domains for commercial entities. You have a project, like let's say it's a bank, and you have a project for 1 year or 2 years, it's some campaign, and then they drop the domain because they don't need it anymore. Companies tend to merge, right? Again, two different entities may merge and continue to work under a single name, and then the other names will be dropped. And of course also a court order. In most European countries, and I believe in many countries around the world, a court can also order the domain to be closed. Sometimes it's closed in such a way that it cannot be registered again. But in Latvia, for example, which is where we did this research, in Latvia, for example, if the court decides that your company itself has to be closed, your domain also immediately has to be released for public registration. So that's a fun case there. So our research question here was, what attack vectors for domain name drop catching can we observe in real life? The topic is not widely researched. We found some research, but we didn't find a lot. So our scope was limited to middle of 2018. We were limiting ourselves to .lv, it's country code top-level domain. And we also experimented with internationalized domain names, so some domain names that contain Unicode characters. We did no phishing, so we didn't try to fool anybody, and we did everything passively, so we did not do any active attacks. We just listened. We just got the domain and listened. We never sent a single unrequested packet. This research consists of both quantitative and qualitative methods, so we take a look at some statistics, and we also will take a look at some specific cases in more in-depth. And we focused on these protocols, so we took a look at FTP, SSH, Telnet, and SMTP, but we also decided to add DNS, HTTP, POP3, and IMAP, and also HTTPS, which was kind of fun, and RDP and VNC. RDP and VNC literally gave no useful results at all. So we looked at them, but apparently that's not what normal people do. I mean, normal people apparently don't use these protocols. Only tech-savvy people and system administrators use RDP and VNC, and they know when their domain has expired. So we haven't caught anything in there. So this is some literature review. What's sad and funny at the same time is that this guy Zats Murray, who was doing the same research at the same time as we were. He gave a presentation, I think, 2 days ago. on his research. We didn't know about that. But his topic was limited to law firms, and it was limited to SMTP only. So we took a bit wider approach here. So a bit of terminology, quickly. Drop catching means re-registering a freshly expired domain name. So domain name has expired, you register it for a different person. There are such things as domain back orders. They have been for many years. Many registrars offer a service to catch the domain. So the domain is active or it's in a grace period, and you can already order it, and in case it will not be renewed, you will immediately become the owner. And some registries cooperate on that service. So you don't even have to monitor. Some registries actually actively provide the information. .lv was one of the registries that also provided a list of recently expired domain names. They decided to stop that because bad people. And domain tasting. This is fun, and we also consider it a bit in the end of the presentation. Domain tasting means registering a domain name for the ad grace period. So let me explain what I'm talking about. This is for GTLDs, not CCTLDs, but it's a good overview. So when you register a domain, you have ad grace period, which was at the time mandated by ICANN, which allows you to cancel your domain and get your money back. It was like that, I think, 20 years ago. Then they started charging 20 cents for that service for getting your money back, and then most of the registrars have actually increased it, this amount. Anyway, so when you register a domain, you can actually cancel it after a while and get all your money back. So that's what people who do domain tasting do. So this is how a normal life cycle of a GTLD looks like, right? You create it, you have it for 1 year or more. Then there's an expiration date. There is auto renew grace period, and then there's redemption period, and then it gets deleted with time. Now for .lv, we looked at the documentation. We observed it empirically, and we talked to some people in there, and this is what we got. It's a bit more simple in a way. By the way, fun fact that I should have known, but I didn't realize until putting this presentation. In every EU country, you can get at least 14 days free domains because you can return them as a service. Anyway, in Latvia, it's 21. 21 days after registration, you can actually not pay for it, and only then it gets stopped and cancelled. And then you have your full year if you pay for it. If not, it goes to RGP, and then it gets basically blocked for 30 days, and after 30 days, someone can register it again. So this is how it looks. With green, we have everything working. With orange, we have when information is still in the WHOIS database, but domains are actually do not resolve. .lv do not employ this deletion period of 5 days. They immediately delete it after RGP has passed, after the renewable grace period has passed. So that's it for theory. Some challenges that we came about when we were doing this was we had in the end 180 domains, and we had one IP address because I didn't want to pay 180 euros for IPv4 is super expensive right now. So it was a challenge because some of the protocols that I mentioned before, they do not include the main field in any way in it, so it's challenging to understand which connection goes to which domain. And then there are lots of bad guys on the internet. That means many of the connections don't even go through a domain. They actually go directly to the IP address because someone scanned you and saw this great machine running RDP, VNC, and everything else and tries to hack it. And of course, we had to distinguish bots versus humans to make any reasonable conclusions here. So, some of the tools we used. We wrote a custom DNS server based on Python Twisted. It's actually quite cool. It responds with 1 second TTL. I mean, you can also configure other DNS servers to do that, but it also logs everything and responds dynamically based on different things that we needed. 1 second TTL, of course, gives us the possibility to actually monitor more closely how often the domain is requested. I will note that many of the recursive name servers will bump that up to 60 seconds, even though you specify 1 second. Then we employed a bunch of honeypots. we looked around, so we took Mail-Only, NetWatch, IMAP Honey, Malbet, which is the universal one, RDP, and VNC Lowpot. The two last ones were the ones that didn't bring any fruitful results. Of course, NetFilter. We can't go about without that. We can't work without that. We had to kind of be able to manage the machine while at the same time it being a full honeypot. Apache, of course, and there we wrote a custom, super simple PHP honeypot that just logs everything. We could, in theory, have gone further and copied over the original web pages that we were mimicking, or tunneled to them, because many of them are actually available on the internet. But as I said, the scope was not phishing, so we didn't do that. We basically just had a static page there that logged everything. And acme.sh plus custom DNS API. So these two things together, custom DNS API plus our custom DNS server, allowed us to actually get HTTPS certificates up on the fly. It takes like 3 seconds, and you have HTTPS certificate. Basically, if you write custom web server, actually, as soon as you get the you get the domain indication in the first packet, you can hold it for 3 seconds, and you can generate the certificate, and you can continue the connection. And lots of custom script to analyze everything. So, how did we set it up? We tried to find recently expired .lv domains that either have search engine presence, so they are visible on the search engines, or they relate to an existing company or person, or recently closed company, or are typos of popular domains. So we didn't do typo squatting per se, but we went and tried drop catching on other typo squatters that got their domains expired. And those are actually quite lucrative. Those brought in some hits. And as soon as we got the domain active, which took anywhere from 10 minutes to 60 minutes, we requested a sell certificate for the domains. So for analysis phase, we tried to link the DNS request logs with other request logs. So for email, it's easy. For SMTP, I mean, it's easy. For web, it's easy. Other logs don't have anything as regards to the domain name. So we linked the logs together using timing. We logged everything using Unix time with precision at least 2 digits after a second. And we tried to link it together using autonomous system numbers and the timing information. Well, it sucked. We got some hits. We could verify some of them. Those were clear. But I think what we need to do in the future, we need to actually have the timing records for the non-DNS protocols be created as soon as first TCP packet or UDP packet hits the server. Because right now they are created when the honeypot understands the connection has been made, and for some honeypots it can take up to a second, which on an active server with 180 domains is too big of a difference. Then we detect bots using standard user agent techniques, of course, and some other header techniques. And then we detect network scanners and brute forcers. We just create the list of most popular usernames, most popular passwords, and we check if that IP address has used at least 5 of them, I think. Then we put it in the bad IP list, and we say that's not a good thing. It's like a bot. So we strip it from our research, and then we look at all the remaining data in detail. Right? We do qualitative analysis on emails and web requests, and quantitative on everything. Yeah, and we actually do have data. So we're going to start first with everything. So bots will be still in there. Attackers will still be in those numbers in the first couple graphs. So these are the main numbers that we registered. We start with registering a couple. We went slow, and we tried to do that in approximately week interval, just to catch when expiry will happen for the first domain, so we can have more data. We did have to use some complex formulas to actually be able to provide reasonable output because of the time for each domain was different, but we managed. I actually fixed the last formula like an hour ago because I understood it's completely wrong. Okay, so these are the requests to the DNS server depending on the type of the domain. As you can see, we only have 4 IDNs, and 176 are ASCIIs, and it changes over time. Anyway, we wrote a magical formula, and we changed the weight. So this graph assumes that we have the equal number of IDN and ASCII domains for equal number of time. So IDN domains suck. They aren't popular. Maybe that's because of the attackers. So attackers are still in there. For record types, nothing special here, as we would expect. Most computers are looking for a record for IPv4, right? Quite a lot of IPv6, and MX is only third afterwards, right? And then TXT for DMARC and SPF, obviously. For subdomains, so we looked at all the domains and just looked at the subdomain part. The black, the red marker on the bottom, which is blacked out, we did that because that subdomain is actually very unique. It's just a lot of traffic was going to that specific subdomain. So we tried not to provide any identifiable data, any non-summarized data here, of course. So half goes to the zone itself. Then we have www, mail, SMTP, webmail, and some other domains there. Now a bit more interesting data we can get if we actually divide it in 2 dimensions. If you look at subdomains and record types for each subdomain, right? So here we can see that root, www, and mail are actually the ones that have IPv6 request presence, and the others do not. So for SMTP, for webmail, most of the clients did not request that. Here is the average requests by length. So how many requests on average did we get per day for a domain depending on its length? Normally, it should probably start high and go low, right? Because the shorter domain, the sweeter it is. In reality, as we were only registering used domains, we can see that correlation isn't strong at all, and that heavily depends on the type of the domain, on the activity of the domain before we take it. Countries, I actually had to add an extra slice because Latvia was only number 11. This is before removing all the bots and malicious users. So we are looking at .lv domains. Latvia is number 11 in source IS countries. Just included a couple of slides for usernames and passwords, just to update everything. Number 1 is censored out. It's not 3 asterisks. That's because, again, number 1 was heavily related to one of the domains. So that we used. So for FTP, it changed me webmaster and admin. I like the new passwords. Apparently nowadays you can't do QWERTY or 1 2 3 4 5 anymore. They make you mix numbers and letters. So that's what users do apparently, and that's what hackers have caught on to. For SSH here, root admin test. Nothing new here. SSH is kind of the same. I was a bit surprised about number 9 in passwords. 1 as a password, which is also, by the way, a legal name for a company, but I wouldn't think that would be somehow correlated. For Telnet also, so we can see the nice backdoor here, password number 6, right, of course. So we had some open relay attempts. We expected more, but we only got like 9% of emails coming in that assumed we are an open relay and try to send stuff through us. Maybe if we leave it open for more, then more open relay attempts will come, but actually 90% went for the actual domains that we have registered to the IP address. For web requests, we have more than half bots and quite a little number of real users, which is actually the case for any low bandwidth site these days. So this is quite a good number here. Okay, now from now on, let's look only at legit data, only at data that actually pertains to real users, not to bots, not to scanners. So registering. Okay, I think this is mixed up. Registering HTTPS was worthwhile. We got 1.7% HTTPS, not 98.3. So 1.7% HTTPS, which isn't a lot, but it means that we got an extra almost 2% just because we got valid certificates. And users trust that more, of course. If we were inclined to do phishing, we would be able to use HTTPS in combination with a reasonable looking website to actually get something out of that, but we weren't doing that. Now for methods, mostly get and a bit of post. So post is what we're looking at. If those are some scripts utilizing an API on a host that has expired, we may actually get some credentials. We may get some other private information through that. Referrers for web. So again, these are only legit users. No referrer, 85%, which was to be expected. Coming from other side, 10%, and from host itself, 3.4%. Now, for host itself, it's a bit strange to see that, right? Because we kind of had this one web page on there with no links. But we think what happens is that many browsers actually override the referrer with the host that it's going to. So that's what we're seeing. But looking at some other headers, we also noticed that small amount of those are actually coming from a cached version of that web page somewhere on the internet. Now, looking at cookies that got passed when requesting our web pages, we see Google Analytics at number 1, of course. We see some session IDs, and we see developers not knowing how to do cookies. Because I said cookie name expire, cookie name pass, cookie name max agent, and so on. It's quite a lot. So we looked at our script 3 times, and it works correctly. So I don't know why our clients sending cookies with these names. It's a bit strange. Usually they should be cookie parameters. Now for web subdomains specifically, we see a bit of different pattern here. We see web disk in addition to webmail, and we see cPanel and auto-discover and forum, which are also quite popular. Of course, the most popular is without www. I remember 10 years ago, www was the most popular one, and typing it without wasn't such a common thing nowadays. Users usually do just that. Now, web for countries. So after removing all the malicious activity, all the bots including, we actually get Latvia at position number 2, which is reasonable. It actually shows that our data is, well, it has some merit to it. Now, email is a very fun part. So we just set up an email server, right? That is a catch-all email server. It receives everything. It logs it to the file system using some safety measures, and we looked for attachments. So most of these are source sender domains, by the way. This mbe.it, the first one, is actually just pure spam. They just sent in 2,000 spam emails from almost the same from the same domain to mostly the same destination address. I don't know what their deal is, but that's what they did. Some of them have attachments, right? Lot of bounced emails have attachments, and what caught our attention are these 2 completely blue parts of the graph, number 5 and 3rd from the right. 3rd from the right also turned out to be completely spam. So it's just someone spamming every time with an attachment. Number 5 from the left turned out to be a critical thing, which I'm gonna talk about in a while. So it says laboratory.lv, which means laboratory.lv. When we look at the emails that actually had attachments and we count each attachment separately, we of course see a lot of images, but we also see PDF in 3rd place. Now, doc files, XLS files, we can see doc here, for example, they aren't that common these days when sending something to a client or sending something to a business partner. PDF files are common, so we actually did take a separate look at all the PDF files, regardless of if they were considered spam or not. And we found some gold in there. Now, attachment types per domains that have attachment. Again, if we look at that, we can see that 2nd from the left now, again, this laboratory.lv, it only has PDF attachments. All of them are PDFs. And if you look at the spam domain, which is number 4 here, we can see those are all JPEGs. Okay, so that's all for quantitative data. Let's look at some examples, some cases in deeper. So when we registered a bunch of new domains, we immediately became aware that we are now a torrent tracker because apparently one of the domains was a torrent tracker, and now we started getting torrent clients. I'm not too well versed in torrent clients, but I guess we could be able to make it do something. Probably not code execution, but mess up files or something, right? So that's kind of cool. You can also track people who do stuff. Then this is very interesting. We got cron requests from abandoned WordPress instances and some other abandoned software. So this is WordPress 4.7.10, which is, well, quite old. So the thing is, what happens with this request? Of course, the good parts are censored out here, but there is an IP address, of course, right? So how WordPress works is on the server that hosts your WordPress, there is some cron-like mechanism that sends a request from that server to itself every hour, every day, whatever, every period of time, which means that we immediately know what IP address the web page is on, even if it's been moved after the domain expired and they moved it somewhere to a private location. So what we can do, if it's an old version of WordPress, in theory, we can rewrite our DNS to point to their IP address, and then we can log in basically into the WordPress or other old software. So these cron-like requests coming from server software over the web are actually quite a good indicator. We can of course also use DNS history databases to do that, but in case they actually wanted to, just move it away, they know it's insecure, they want to move it away, store it for some time, we can actually see where it is. So it pings back home that way. Now, some governmental sites had stuff embedded on their page that was linking to some of the domains that we got. So in theory, we could start, well, this is a JPEG, for example, right? And the client says that it accepts images, but it also accepts anything else. So depending on the browser configuration, we could kind of try to inject something in there into .gov.lv pages that way. And this is the, if we talk about web, this is the most critical part of web. So this VRA vis NSAR is code name in Latvia for a governmental system that connects all other governmental systems. So it tries to connect to one of our domains because apparently it's part of a governmental system. So if we were to put in and all the specs are public for it's a open e-governments, all the specs are public, we could in theory build something that adheres to their requests and start feeding it data. Okay, let's look at some emails. So of course you will get notifications from social networks in there. For example, this is notification from Instagram. And apparently this specific account was configured to receive notification when anything happens. So we got like six notifications over the course of 3 weeks that we were doing this. What this in fact means is that it's not about notifications, but it usually means that your email account is configured as a recovery address for that account, which means that if we were to do active attacks, we could go to this site, enter this email address, request reset, receive it in our catch-all mail server, and be inside the account. Also, Latvian-specific social networks. Again, you are getting this. In this case, it came to a commercial entity, not to a private person. It talks about their commercial web page that they have hosted on the social network. And again, we are reasonably sure that we actually would be able to connect and take over control of that part of the social network. And some Belgian social network as well. Already with lists of your potential friends, and I think pictures too. We were doing these pictures, remote pictures of. Then PDFs are super fun. So for example, here's a group reservation for a hotel. Check-in date for the esteemed guests is 26th of September 2018. So there's possibility to go check into a hotel somewhere. Or cancel the reservation, of course, yes. If you're into that kind of shit, I'd rather check into the hotel, but you can cancel the reservation, sure. Then we got the email from a lawyer. We are very afraid of lawyers. I mean, I am since Skype tried to sue me like more than 10 years ago. I'm very afraid of that. So I censored most of the shit out. It just says lawyer there on the bottom left. Then we have a message from Internal Revenue Service of Latvia saying that stuff is happening to your company, which apparently the intended recipient didn't get, because we got it. Then we have flight reservations. This flight is also still in the future. There's the booking reference number, name, and everything you need to do stuff. Bills. Bills sometimes contain a lot of private data, sometimes not so much. In this case, which you can't see because I blacked it all out, it contained like everything, from the personal ID to addresses, phone numbers, emails, of the individual involved. Cheap hosting, actually. It's like 3.5 euros per month. Here's the telecommunications bill. Now, what I think about this, about telecommunications bill, I think you should be actually able to call up the company using the client number there. I mean, when I try to call this telecommunications company, they usually ask for your client number and then your password. If you don't know your password, they ask you, well, how much did you pay us last time? Do you have any debts and stuff like that? And it's only here in this email. So I'm thinking maybe you could kind of convince them to think that you are him or her with this information that you got here. You of course have the amount to be paid as well in here. Overdue payment notifications, of course. Very similar to a bill again. Now we get to some interesting stuff. So this is electronically signed official letter from the government to a company. It says basically here are news regarding your company, how regulations will change and how will you benefit from it. Again, the recipient apparently never received it, unfortunately. Here's something even more interesting. This isn't so the previous one is like a mass mail. It basically goes to 1,000, maybe 10,000 companies. This one is specific to a single individual or a single company. This is a different branch of the government saying that basically we have approved the thing you wanted to do with your company, or we have not approved it in a different case. Now, GPS tracking. Apparently, some people still live in like 5 years ago, and they receive GPS tracking alerts to their email rather than their app or wherever. So this says that your car is not in the object. There's object name and address, and then there's time when it's not there. So when it's leaving. So this is a legit bank statement. We got like 10 of these, I think. It had everything. You know, banks know everything about you. It had your personal ID, your name, surname, your full address, your list of how much funds you had there, which days did you buy what in which shops. Like, wow, it's. We try to understand why it got there, because from the domains, from 180 domains that we registered, we actually had some domains that belonged to banks, health institutions, stuff like that. But this was not related to any of those domains. So it would seem that people are just randomly sending sensitive information over the internet. Speaking of sensitive information, this actually made me smile in a good way. Well, first of all, we got like more than 100 sensitive health documents regarding recent health evaluations of patients. And then they were encrypted, which is good. I hope the security is good. At least they were smart enough to do that. So that was a domain that we saw at number 2. When we looked at the attachments, it had all the PDFs. That's what they're sending. It's an automatic system, apparently. If you're a doctor and you send your patient to do a test, then it automatically sends the result to your email address. And if you happen to lose your domain, then we get the results. If only we knew the password. I mean, actively we could be able to get it probably, right? We push the original user to enter their passwords, some of the passwords, and one of the passwords probably match. But we are not into that stuff. We just want to understand the potential impact of drop catching a domain name. Now, finally, again about health. To finish on that, this is one document that was not encrypted. One of the documents that was not encrypted, and basically includes, it says number 1, your employer, number 2, your name, surname, 3, your identity code, 4, where you actually live, 5, your profession, 6, your health stuff. That 6 continues down below. So it's like a full health profile on you if you're healthy or not. Okay, so let's take a look at what we can do to prevent this. And first of all, let's take a look at what attacker stands to gain from all this and what do you stand to lose as a domain owner. So, as a previous owner of a domain, by not prolonging registration of your domain, you of course endanger your clients and business partners by the virtue of them continuing to send you data, maybe your shared client data, and it getting into the wrong hands. Of course, also, if clients actively go to your web page, attacker can easily create a phishing web page that takes over their credentials. And as we know, most of the users limit their number of passwords to 5 online, which means one of the passwords will most likely fit some other services. Now, you also endanger employees who used emails for personal accounts. As I mentioned previously, we can do password reset to actually get back, well, not back control, but take over the account and start working with it. And it doesn't matter if it's a social network or if it's a professional network. For example, I imagine that the person who were trying to receive all those medical statements to their email has probably registered at some electronic health system using the same email address. So if we were so inclined, we would probably be able to go look around and get access to that. And again, endanger even more people in the process. Of course, banking, insurance, and sensitive health information was also involved here, so it's really important to prolong the domain. From attacker perspective, additional stuff. So you can get commercial secrets. What we didn't include here in the slides is we also saw some tender responses, right? So when a government institution wants to buy something, they create a tender, and then different corporations submit their prices, which is supposed to be secret until the end date. Well, if they send it wrongly, then we get it. Many of these things actually happened regarding email. Many of these incidents actually happened not because someone sent an email to the wrong domain, to an expired domain, but because they CC'd someone. So they sent to the recipient and just CC their old email address or CC a different colleague, which happens to be on the domain that we control. So all the installations of your website, I briefly touched upon that. So once again, when you have requests coming in from your website itself, like cron-like requests, you're able to understand to get the IP address, you're able to connect to it, and you're able to look around. And if you don't have a domain for your website for months, maybe 6 months after a while, sure as hell you're not going to be updating it. So you have a hole, and if it's a multi-host, then you own a lot of different things on there, maybe some other actual domains. Attackers may gain control over government systems. So once again, we had this government system connecting to us, asking to peer with them, to do API calls, to respond to API calls. We might explore that further to see what kind of things we can do there. So it's a bit interesting. We can also gain control over user passwords. So one way is phishing, but there's actually a pseudo-passive way to do that as well. There are breach notification sites, right? For example, Have I Been Pwned is one of those. And we can actually type our information in and see if we have been, if our password has leaked. Now, as a domain administrator, if you hold complete control of the domain, most of those sites allow you to get a list of emails on your domain that have had their credentials leaked. So we didn't manage to get it to work because of Google CAPTCHA. I'm going to talk about Google CAPTCHA tomorrow in my privacy talk. Google CAPTCHA hates me. But apparently we can try it again, and apparently you're able to get a list of all email addresses and even get notifications when a new breach happens. One question that I have here is, how long does the subscription stay valid? So we haven't been able to test it, but after you sign up for a domain, for a breach notification, do you receive notifications for a year, 10 years, 20 years? So that's one direction where this may be going. And of course, SSL certificates for the future website. So this doesn't actually concern drop catching per se. It also works for domain tasting. So if I take a domain, register it for 21 days, I don't even need 21 days. 1 hour is enough. I have 1 hour. I request a SSL certificate. Let's Encrypt gives you 3 months. I'm quite sure that the other paid certificate authorities actually have upped their game and aren't so picky about what you're requesting certificate for and actually provide automatic process, meaning that you should be able to get a 1-year certificate if you pay for it. So you register domain for 14 days or 21 days, depends on the country. You get the certificate for 1 year, and then you go and meet the hell out of the new owner afterwards. So that's an interesting concept which we have to test. And we're going to talk about further work in 3 minutes. So what can you do to protect against this? First of all, use two-factor authentication. If you have to use SMS, use SMS, but they'll probably own you even worse than using DNS drop catching. Use a proper two-factor authentication, anything but SMS or GSM calls, and you're going to be fine for your private accounts. The best thing you can do is pay for your damn domains. I think I've been paying for my domains like forever. The only domains that I dropped are some that are never really used, and it's like 30 domains every year. If you decide not to pay for a domain, then please notify everyone. Notify your partners, your business partners, notify your employees so they understand what's happening. Notify any third parties that are using your API. So for example, what happened here with this domain, which government tries to connect to, they should have notified the government that, sorry, we aren't doing that anymore, we don't have a domain, please stop sending API requests. Otherwise, bad guys can come and screw up your system. Luckily, we're good guys, so we haven't done that yet. So also, remove all the email addresses from online accounts. That goes without saying, right? Use whatever, use your personal domain, use Gmail, whatever floats your boat. And one innovative approach that we are proposing is checking for suspicious behavior of mail servers. So it's probably something that has to be discussed in an RFC, but I have some ideas how mail servers should be able to try to understand if they are about to send a mail to an imposter. Right? If it's recently changed NS request, NS record, if it's currently accepting all addresses, right? There are some domains, legit domains that accept all addresses. Many of us configure our domains to be catch-all domains, but these two parameters together, a new NS record plus accepting all emails, should probably raise a red flag for a mail server, and mail server should do checks for that before sending out an email. Now for further work. We want to gather a larger, more representative data set. We did see that the domains we registered were missing some lengths. For example, we went from, I think, 18 to 23, so we were missing domain of length between there. And we want the graphs to be more normalized, so we need a larger data set there. And we want to practically verify the following 3 attack scenarios. So we want to use, as I already mentioned, add grace period to request SSL certificates valid for as long as possible. After we get the certificate, we wait for the domain to be registered by a legitimate party, and then we can MITM connections to the domain after it's been re-registered. So there are some some mechanisms that can prevent that, right? You can use HPKP, so keeping, which isn't really that fun. I understand that the internet community is dropping it in favor of domain transparency, certificate transparency, but certificate transparency doesn't really help with that thing. I mean, they can get information that there's a valid certificate for the domain, and they can try to request cancellation of the certificate. But I wonder how that's going to go. And after we do this practical attack, we would write an advisory if we really conclude that the current SSL isn't as secure as it should be in this specific scenario. We also would like to do an active attack and locate and access the old servers by looking at these cron-like requests that we keep getting. Funny enough, the first cron-like request we were getting actually came to a legitimate domain name. So we have a domain name to manage this honeypot, and it's one of the domain names that I have owned it for like 5 years. And as soon as I added this domain name, we started also getting stuff to that domain. So 5 years later, someone is still running WordPress somewhere on that domain and it's still alive and kicking and trying to access cron. So we might ping back and take a look at the WordPress at some point. And finally, register breach notification alerts for domain and wait. So we just would subscribe and we see how fast do we get canceled. How long do we have to wait to stop receiving notifications about users that aren't our users anymore. So that's all I have for you today. I hope it was interesting and enlightening, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
So nice data you get there. Did you contact the people which forgot to renew their domain and told them, well, you have some data that you want to have?
I was thinking to contact CERT, local CERT. We do have quite a good cooperation with CERT, but I instead contacted local NIC. So they are working on it. I mean, it's a CCTLD, so they have very strict government-regulated policies, and there's nothing they can do, unfortunately. So basically, they have to wait for the domains to expire because we haven't paid for them, and yeah. But about contacting the actual companies involved, well, we have bad experience with that when doing responsible disclosure. So we'd rather go either through CERT or through NIC.
Any more questions?
So some of the scripts are probably going to be up on GitHub sometime when I don't have anything better to do, and yeah, you can play around with those. Oh, the best scripts are actually the scripts for making the graphs. I spent like 6 hours tuning the graphs, and now I have auto scripts that make them. So
I can confirm fancy scripts. How much money do you spend for all the domains and the research?
0.
So if there are free domains or what?
No, they aren't free domains. So what happens is that we use this
the get and refund.
Grace period, yes. Add grace period, which is 21 days. In Latvia, you don't even have to pay for the 21 days, so you don't have to worry about getting the money back. So, yeah.
Did you try to get it, refund, and get it again? Or are they again blocked for some time?
Oh, they are blocked for 30 days. We have this redemption grace period afterwards, which you can still pay for it, but it's not working. So either you pay for it or you skip 30 days. So it's 2130, 2130. So it's for some TLDs, I hear it's 50-50 or even better. Here is below 50. So the active part.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you very much.